The clinking of silverware and the low hum of laughter filled the restaurant's private dining room. My parents had organized one of their beloved family dinners, the kind where relatives gathered just to boast about promotions, houses, cars, and vacations. The air smelled of roasted chicken and red wine, but to me it always smelled of arrogance. I slid into a chair near the corner, hoping to stay unnoticed to blend into the wallpaper. I hated these gatherings. They were never about family. Were stages for competition, and I was always the punchline. Ah, there he is. My brother's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Loud, commanding, dripping with mockery. Our family's charity case, the laughter that followed stung more than the words themselves. Uncles chuckled, cousins smirked, and even my mother's lips twitched into something dangerously close. To a smile, I froze. My fork halfway to my mouth, could feel dozens of eyes on me. "Tell me," my brother continued, leaning back in his chair with that smug grin he'd mastered since childhood, "did you take the bus here again? Or was it the subway this time?" A ripple of laughter burst around the table. I lowered my fork and placed it neatly on the plate. My chest tightened. My palms grew damp. "He wasn't finished. He never was. Kino," he said, raising his wine glass theatrically. "Some people arrive in style. Cars, leather seats, engines that roar like lions. And then there's you arriving in. What was it last time? Oh, right. Sneakers worn thin, smelling like rain, and a bus ticket in your pocket." The table roared with laughter. I could feel my ears burning, my throat aching with shame. My cousin across the table muttered under her breath, "Poor thing." But her pity wasn't kindness. It was gasoline on the fire. My father cleared his throat, pretending to be diplomatic but only making it worse. "Don't be too hard on him. Not everyone can keep up, you know." I wanted to disappear, to crawl under the table, out the door, into the night. But then my brother leaned forward, his voice lower now, cutting, meant only for me, though the whole table could still. "Here, face it, little brother. You'll never catch up. You'll always be the poor one." He smirked, raising his glass in a mock toast. "To our family's underachiever." The table erupted again. Glasses clinked. Laughter echoed, and something inside me snapped. I didn't slam my fists. I didn't shout. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I smiled. A small, quiet smile that made him pause for just a fraction of a second. I lifted my own glass of water, the ice clinking softly. "To family," I said evenly, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. "May we always remember that wealth isn't just about money." The table went silent for a moment, then erupted again in cruel laughter. "Listen to him?" my brother scoffed, wiping a fake tear from his eye. "Preaching philosophy because he can't afford reality. Adorable." But I just kept smiling, because deep down a thought had lodged itself into my chest like a spark. One day I won't just arrive at this table. I'll arrive in a way that makes every single one of you choke on your laughter. Dinner dragged on, filled with stories of vacations in Spain, new houses in gated communities, and luxury watches that cost more than my yearly rent. Every word was a reminder of where I didn't belong. I ate in silence, each bite of food heavy in my throat. When dessert came, my brother leaned over once more. "Tell me," he sneered, his voice sugar-sweet with venom. "When's the last time you even sat behind the wheel of a car? Do you even remember what it feels like?" More laughter. Always more laughter. I set down my spoon and looked him in the eye. "No," I said softly. "But you will." He blinked. "What?" I leaned back in my chair, my smile calm, my eyes steady. "You'll remember this night. You'll remember mocking me for being poor. And one day, when you least expect it, you'll see me arrive differently." The table hushed. For the first time all evening, silence stretched across the room. My brother's smirk faltered just for a heartbeat. But then he laughed again, louder than before. "Hear that? He's planning a grand entrance. Maybe in 10 years when he can finally afford a used bicycle? The room roared. Glasses clinked. My parents shook their heads. But I didn't look away. Let the smile linger. Let my words hang in the air like smoke no laughter could blow away. Because in that moment, I wasn't broken. I wasn't humiliated. I was fueled. And though they didn't know it, the countdown had already begun. That night, as I walked home in the cold, the laughter still echoing in my ears, I passed the parking lot. Rows of polished cars gleamed under the streetlights. Mercedes, BMWs, SUVs big enough to crush my tiny rented apartment. I walked past them all, my shoes splashing in puddles. And as the rain began to fall, I whispered to myself, "Mock me now. But soon I'll drive past you, and you'll be the one left in the rain." People think humiliation happens in one moment, like a slap across the face. But in truth, humiliation is built over years, layer by layer, word by word. Smile by smile that says, "You'll never be enough." My brother had always been the favored one, not just in small ways, but in everything that mattered. I still remember the day he got his first car. He was 18. My father tossed him the keys with a proud grin, clapping him on the back as if he'd just won a war. "You deserve this," Dad said. "You're a man now." The car gleamed in the driveway, polished black with leather seats that smelled like success. Neighbors gathered, clapping, congratulating. My mother wiped tears from her eyes, calling it a milestone for our family. I was 15 at the time. I stood in the corner, holding my books, my backpack weighed down with homework and after-school job applications. No one looked at me. No one asked if I wanted to learn how to drive. No one asked me anything at all. A week later, when my brother crashed that same car into a mailbox because he was drunk, my father laughed. "Boys will be boys," he said, and 3 months later, they bought him another one. Bigger, better. When I asked if I could at least take driving lessons, my mother frowned. "We can't afford luxuries like that for you." Luxuries. Driving lessons were luxuries for me, but brand new cars were necessities for him. That was how it always was. At birthdays, his cakes had 3 tiers, sparkling candles and balloons. That touched the ceiling. My cakes, when I got them, were small and plain, store-bought at the last minute. When he failed his math exam, my parents hired him a tutor. When I topped my class, they barely looked up from their phones. When he wanted new clothes, he got the latest brands. When I asked for a pair of sneakers because mine had holes in them, my father sighed. "Stop being so demanding." It wasn't just favoritism. It was a system, a rule. He was light. I was shadow. By the time we reached college age, the gap was enormous. My brother's tuition was paid in full, his dorm furnished like a small apartment, his weekends spent traveling with friends. Me, I didn't even get a good luck. I had to take out loans, work 2 part-time jobs, and still survive on instant noodles and leftover cafeteria food. I worked mornings shelving books at the library, afternoons wiping tables at a cafe, nights tutoring high school kids in algebra. My body was exhausted, my mind stretched thin, but quitting was never an option. Sometimes I'd come home late, smelling of coffee and sweat, only to find my brother sprawled on the couch, laughing at the TV. Surrounded by takeout boxes and the latest gadgets. "Hey, broke boy," he'd say without looking at me. Crab. "Me, a soda, will you?" Every word was a reminder. In their eyes, I wasn't just poor in money, I was poor in worth. But I kept going, because I had one thing he didn't. I had grit. Every insult, every dismissal, every door slammed in my face it became fuel. Every time they called me worthless, I stayed up another hour working. Every time they mocked me, I saved another dollar. Every time they ignored me, I reminded myself, one day they won't be able to ignore me anymore. I'll never forget one winter night during my second year of college. The wind cut like knives through my jacket as I walked home from work. My shoes were soaked from slush, my hands numb. A car honked, and I turned just in time to see my brother speeding past in his brand new convertible. Music blasting, friends laughing. For a moment, I stood frozen on the icy sidewalk, watching the red tail lights vanish into the distance. And then I whispered to myself, one day I'll pass you. And when I do, you'll remember this night. But struggle wasn't just money, it was dignity. At family dinners, he was always the center of attention. Stories about his trips, his purchases, his so-called adventures, everyone clapped, laughed, and praised. When it was my turn to speak, silence, eyes rolled. Someone changed the subject. Sometimes my father would cut in with a dismissive laugh. Don't bore us with your little jobs. Nobody wants to hear about wiping tables. But I wasn't wiping tables forever. I was saving. Every paycheck, no matter how small, went into a jar, then a bank account. Slowly, painfully, the balance grew. And with every dollar, so did my determination. Then came the moment that changed everything. A professor at my college noticed my hard work, my late nights, my relentless drive. He offered me a position as his research assistant. The pay wasn't much, but it was steady and it opened doors. From there, I landed internships, part-time contracts, and eventually a job that paid more than anything my brother had ever earned. But I didn't brag. I didn't flaunt. I kept quiet. Let them laugh. Let them mock. Let them believe I was still poor, because I wanted the reveal to burn. The last family dinner before the car moment was the worst. We sat around the table, the room buzzing with chatter. My brother leaned back in his chair, swirling wine in his glass. So, he said loudly, still taking the bus to work, "Must be fun. Crowded, sweaty, late. It's perfect for you. Laughter. Always laughter." I smiled faintly, sipping my water. "Actually," I said softly, "things have been looking up." Kay snorted. "Looking up? What? Did your cafe finally promote you to head dishwasher?" The table howled. I stayed silent, smiling because in my pocket my phone buzzed with a message from the dealership confirming my test drive for the next day. And in my mind, I saw it already, his face when I pulled up, the color draining from his cheeks, the laughter dying in his throat. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought about everything I'd endured. The birthdays forgotten, the dinners filled with insults, the nights I walked in the rain while he sped past in luxury. It had all led to this. Every humiliation had built me into something stronger than him. Something money couldn't buy. And soon the world where family would see it. Not through words, not through arguments. Through action. Through the roar of an engine he never believed I could own. The night after that humiliating family dinner, I lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling of my tiny apartment. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my brother's smug grin. His wine glass raised high while the whole table laughed at me. His words echoed like they had been carved into my bones. "You'll always be the poor one." I clenched my fists under the blanket, my nails digging crescents into my palms. That wasn't the first time he'd said it. It wasn't even the worst. But something about the way everyone else had joined in, parents, cousins, uncles, and Scott, deeper than before. I realized, lying there in the dark, that I was done. Done pretending I didn't care. Done swallowing my pride while he turned me into a punchline. Done being the poor one in a family that measured worth by cars, houses, and vacations. That night was my breaking point. The next morning, I dragged myself out of bed before sunrise. The air was sharp, biting, but it cleared my head. I walked to the corner store, bought a cheap notebook, and on the very first page, I wrote 3 words in bold, angry letters. Enough is enough. For hours, I sat at my kitchen table with a dull pencil, writing down everything I'd endured. Childhood memories poured out. Watching my brother get his first car while I got nothing. My birthdays forgotten while his were celebrated with parties. Being told to work harder while he crashed cars and got new ones as replacements. Taking the bus in the rain while he sped past in leather seats. The list grew until the page blurred through my tears. But at the bottom, I added one more line. This ends now. From that day on, I shifted gears. I worked harder at my research assistant job. I picked up extra tutoring clients. I said yes to every freelance project, even the ones that kept me awake until 3 a.m. My body ached. My eyes burned. But I carried that notebook everywhere, and whenever I felt weak, I opened to that first page. Enough is enough. Every insult from my brother became fuel. Every memory of laughter at my expense was a spark that pushed me further. Slowly, painfully, my savings account grew. Then came the moment that felt like fate. One afternoon, my professor called me into his office. His glasses were sliding down his nose, papers stacked high on his desk. "I've been watching you," he said, not unkindly. "You're disciplined, reliable. You don't complain. How would you feel about a bigger role? The pay would double, maybe more if you stick with it." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I thought of my brother, of the bus rides, of the laughter. And I said, with a voice steadier than I felt, "I'll take it." That promotion changed everything. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was building. The idea that had seemed impossible before a car of my own suddenly shifted from dream to goal. I started visiting dealerships on my lunch breaks. At first, I pretended I was just browsing. I'd walk between the polished cars, hands in my pockets, heart hammering. Salesmen barely looked at me. They thought I couldn't afford anything, and maybe I couldn't then. But I studied the numbers, memorized prices, and ran calculations at night in my notebook. Each week I came a little closer. I learned about financing, about credit, about interest rates. I practiced saying the words out loud. I'm here to buy. The day I finally walked into a dealership with enough money for a down payment, my hands shook so badly I had to shove them in my pockets. The salesman gave me the usual look, like I didn't belong. But this time, I didn't flinch. "I'm not here to look," I told him. "I'm here to buy." The paperwork was a blur. I handed over my ID, my pay stubs, my bank records. Signature trembled as I signed the contract. But inside, something fierce unfurled. When the keys dropped into my palm, cool and heavy, I almost cried. This wasn't just metal and wheels. This was years of humiliation forged into an engine. This was proof that I could take every insult, every laugh, and turn it into fuel. Driving off the lot that evening, I felt a rush I can't describe. The world outside the window looked different, smaller somehow, like I had finally risen above it. The steering wheel was warm under my hands. The engine purred like it was whispering, "You did it." And as I drove through the city streets, I imagined the look on my brother's face, the smirk wiped clean. The laughter caught in his throat, the moment he realized his poor brother had built something on his own. Its timing couldn't have been better. Just a week later, my cousin announced his engagement party. Everyone would be there. A big family gathering, the perfect stage. For once, I didn't dread the invite. I circled the date in my notebook. This was it, the night my brother's words would choke him. In the days leading up to the party, my brother never stopped. He called once, just to gloat. "Hey, need me to pick you up for the party? I know buses don't run late." He laughed at his own joke, the sound sharp and cruel. I smiled to myself. "No thanks, I'll manage." He laughed again, thinking I meant I'd walk. Right, but I already had the keys in my pocket. The night of the engagement party, the family gathered at a lavish banquet hall. My brother, of course, arrived early, showing off his car in the parking lot, bragging about the leather seats and the custom sound system. Relatives crowded around, nodding, pretending to care. He spotted me walking toward the entrance. His grin widened. "Here he comes," he shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Did you jog here or maybe hitchhike?" The crowd chuckled. I smiled faintly, adjusting my tie. "Don't worry," I said softly. "You'll see how I got here soon enough." The banquet hall shimmered with lights, its tall windows glowing like a stage set. Cars lined the parking lot, polished and proud, like trophies displayed for inspection. And right in the center, gleaming under the lamplight, stood my brother's pride and joy, his black sedan. He leaned against the hood with his arms folded, sunglasses perched on his head even though the sun had long dipped behind the horizon. Relatives clustered around him, laughing at his stories about leather seats and horsepower. I watched from the edge of the lot, my hands wrapped around the steering wheel of my new car, heart pounding like a drum. I could have parked quietly, slipped inside unnoticed. But tonight wasn't about blending in. Tonight was about being seen. So instead, I eased forward, the headlights slicing through the chatter. Conversations faltered as faces turned. My brother squinted into the light, annoyed at first until he realized the car wasn't one of his friends. I slowed, pulled smoothly into an open space just a few feet from his, and killed the engine. Silence fell over the crowd, broken only by the cooling tick of metal. Then I stepped out. The night air wrapped around me like a cloak. My shoes clicked against the asphalt, deliberate and steady. I didn't rush, didn't smile, didn't explain. I just stood there for a moment, letting them all take it in the unfamiliar car. The way the street lamp painted silver across its hood, the way I held the keys loosely in my hand like they weighed nothing at all. My brother broke first. "Whose car is that?" he demanded, too loudly, as if volume could make the question less dangerous. I dangled the keys once, then slid them into my pocket. Mine. A ripple of disbelief ran through the group. My uncle raised his eyebrows. A cousin whispered something to another who covered her mouth with her hand. My brother forced a laugh. "Yours, please. Since when do you own a car?" "Since last week," I said calmly. Smile wavered. "Stop joking." My mother cut in, her tone sharp, her eyes darting nervously to the relatives around her. "Don't embarrass yourself." But the murmurs grew. People stepped closer, circling the car like it was an animal in a zoo. Someone brushed their hand along the door. Another peered inside the window. "Spotless." One cousin muttered. "Look at those seats," another added. "Not rented." A third whispered. "No," I said, my voice steady. "Not rented. Not borrowed, bought." My brother's face flushed. He stepped forward, trying to block me from the crowd. "Come on, everyone knows you can't afford this. You barely scrape by. What? Did you win the lottery?" I tilted my head, my smile faint but sharp. "No lottery, just work." The silence that followed was heavier than the laughter I used to endure. For once, no one chuckled. No one joined his mockery. They were too busy staring at me like they'd never seen me before. My father cleared his throat, trying to salvage control. "Well, that's surprising. But still, it's just a car." But even he didn't sound convinced. I stepped closer to my brother, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "Remember what you said at dinner about how I'd always be poor, about how I'd never sit behind the wheel?" His jaw clenched. "Well," I said, slipping the keys out of my pocket and twirling them once between my fingers. "Look closely, because this is the moment you'll remember." Before he could reply, a voice called from the doorway. "Who owns that silver car?" It was my cousin's fiancé, the groom-to-be. He jogged across the lot, his face lit with admiration. "That's a beauty. I didn't know anyone in the family drove one like that." He stopped in front of me, hand outstretched. "Congratulations. You've done well." I shook his hand, and the applause started small, just one or two relatives clapping politely, but then it spread. Others nodded, smiled, muttered words of praise. The tide was turning. For the first time in my life, the spotlight wasn't on my brother. It was on me. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply walked past my brother toward the hall entrance, my steps unhurried, the murmurs of admiration following me like a trail of light. Behind me, I heard my brother hiss through his teeth, "This doesn't change anything." But it did. Because in that single moment, with nothing more than a set of keys and the truth, I had rewritten the story. Inside the hall, people whispered about the car all evening. They came up to me with questions: what model, what year, how I managed it. I answered calmly, without boasting, letting my composure speak louder than words. Every time I glanced across the room, I saw my brother sulking in the corner, his wineglass untouched, his smile gone. My parents avoided my eyes, too busy pretending everything was normal. But the guests knew. They had seen the shift. The golden child wasn't golden anymore. Later that night, as the music swelled and people danced, I stepped outside for air. The lot was quiet now, the cars lined like sleeping beasts. My silver car sat under the lamp, gleaming softly. I leaned against the hood, breathing in the night. This wasn't just about a car. It wasn't about metal or speed. It was about dignity, about proving to myself more than anyone that I could rise. And as I stood there, I knew, tomorrow and every tomorrow after, my brother would remember this night. The night his laughter died, the engagement party carried on with music. Laughter and glasses clinking, but the atmosphere was different now. People had seen what happened outside in the parking lot. They had seen my brother's smirk fade and his certainty shatter. Every whisper, every sideways glance felt like tiny cracks spreading through the golden pedestal he'd always stood on. And for once, those whispers weren't about me being poor. They were about him. At our family table, my brother sat stiff, shoulders tense, his jaw tight as though holding back words he couldn't afford to spit. My parents tried to carry on my mother complimenting someone's earrings. My father asking about work, but their eyes darted toward me every few seconds, wary, unsettled. I didn't gloat. I didn't even bring it up. I simply sat, cutting my food quietly, answering questions politely when relatives asked about my job, my plans, my car. And every answer I gave was another nail in the coffin of their old narrative. Research work, isn't it? One uncle asked me. Yes, I replied calmly. The projects are steady. The pay is good, and the car. He asked, unable to resist. I smiled faintly. Earned nothing more, nothing less. The murmurs rose again. Heads nodded. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw my brother's knuckles whiten around. His fork. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. Slammed the fork down, the clatter silencing half the table. So what? You bought a car? Big deal. Anyone can buy a car on credit. The room froze. People looked from him to me, waiting. I set my knife down gently, dabbed the corner of my mouth with a napkin, and looked him in the eye. Maybe, but not everyone can pay for one without asking their parents. Gasps rippled through the room. Our brother's face turned scarlet. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? I said softly. Many times did Dad bail you out when you crashed yours? How many times did Mom defend you when you wasted money? Every car you had was handed to you. Mine wasn't. Silence. It's the kind that weighs on everyone's shoulders. He pushed back his chair, voice rising. You think you're better than me now? Because of one car? I shook my head, calm. Steady? No, I don't think I'm better than you. I know I worked harder, and that's the difference. The bride's father stood suddenly, raising his glass. To hard work, he said firmly. And to earning what you have. The guests clapped. Some stood. The applause swelled, drowning my brother's sputtering protests. I raised my own glass, not to mock him, not to flaunt, but to honor myself. To perseverance, I said. And to never letting anyone tell you that you're less. The cheers grew louder. My brother's face twisted and he stormed out, his footsteps echoing across the hall. My parents followed quickly, embarrassed, avoiding every eye. But the applause didn't stop. It followed me like a tide, washing away years of humiliation. Later, after the music had slowed and guests began to leave, I stepped outside again. The lot was quieter now. Night, cool and sharp. My car waited under the same streetlamp.com unbothered. I leaned against it, hands in my pockets, staring up at the stars. This wasn't about money. It was never about the car itself. It was about dignity, about proving that I was not the family's shame, not the weak one, not the poor one. For years, my brother's laughter had been a chain around my neck. But tonight, I had broken it not with anger, not with shouting, but with proof. As I slid into the driver's seat, I thought about the boy who had once walked home in the rain while his brothers sped past in leather seats. That boy was gone. In his place sat a man who had built something no one could take away. I turned. The key, the engine, purred to life. And as I drove past the hall, I whispered to myself, he mocked me for being poor. But when he saw me drive past in my new car, his laughter died forever. Sometimes revenge isn't loud, doesn't need fists or shouts. Sometimes revenge is quiet, the sound of an engine, the sight of a key, the moment you prove every insult wrong. He mocked me for being poor. But in the end, I was the one who drove away, and he was left behind. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Toxic Bloodlines for more shocking family betrayals, secrets, and revenge stories you'll never forget. Until next time, stay strong.